you know, Citizens Climate Lobby is here to create the political will for a livable world. So that's really big, and of course we need all your help in order to do that. Today, this afternoon's sessions will begin and end with wonderful Clarence Edwards, who I had the pleasure of meeting last year because Madeline asked me to moderate the plenary in the June conference. Since then, I have really appreciated the intriguing tweets that he gives. It shows that he makes a lot of connections with a lot of events and books and ideas. And that's one of the things that I think is much needed, those connections across history, history does give us a perspective of where we need to go about the human mind and about how society works, how civilization works. So I'm so pleased that he is willing to give a 10-minute overview of where climate legislation is presently, and then end with next steps for climate legislation with thoughts about carbon pricing. So Clarence?
Thank you, my friend. Good morning, everybody. Is this still morning?
You're tall.
If you were in California,
when you travel a lot, you tend to forget what time zone you're in sometimes. I only came up from Washington, D.C., so I have no excuse. But it's great to see everybody this morning. A great turnout. Be in New Jersey, which I said to a friend of mine, I'll be up near Trenton in New Jersey, and he said, Standard Oil. He said, the home of Standard Oil. It's also the home of real industrial base of this country in towns like Camden and this town, Trenton. And that's really relevant to what's been going on with climate policy over the past year and a half. I don't have to tell this very well-informed group of people about some of the exciting climate legislation that's been happening, but I'll do a brief overview of it for you anyway, and tie it into where we think this issue is going. By way of background, I'm the Legislative Director for Sustainable Energy and Environment for the Friends Committee on National Legislation. It's a Quaker-centered, Quaker-oriented organization. It's been around lobbying Capitol Hill since 1943. And one of our phrases that we use is to say that we seek an earth restored. And by that, we mean that we want to see balanced environmental policies that protect people and the planet. And we're aiming for that low carbon future. Part of that low carbon future is are a lot of the things that were contained in the Inflation Reduction Act. At $369 billion, including $60 billion in environmental justice funding, really lays the groundwork for a sustainable low carbon economy that has opportunity for everybody. In terms of its implementation, since it was signed last mid-August or so, after shockingly coming back from the dead, the bill known as Build Back Better arose as the Inflation Reduction Act, which may be one of the worst bill titles. It doesn't really describe what it is, but these things are necessary. Politics. So we've been tracking the implementation of the bill since August. And it's really a slow process because the government is, it's a huge multi-trillion-dollar organization, and moving the government to do anything takes time. But Treasury, the Environmental Protection Agency, the IRS are all working to promulgate the rules that will govern how this money is distributed. It's particularly important, for example, the EPA came out a couple of weeks ago with some of the regulations and the framing for how the $27 billion greenhouse gas reduction fund, that they, or AKA a green bank, really putting the parameters around how they will dole out that funding. Just earlier this week, the Department, the Environmental Protection Agency also announced $550 million in environmental justice funds to address legacy pollution and helping people to gain access to clean energy. So I raised these two pieces just to demonstrate the fact that bits and pieces of the IRA are getting started, it's getting into the mainstream of American society slowly. This is a 10-year bill, and these monies are going to be doled out over the next decade. So it's a slow start. Whenever people ask, what's happening with the IRA, I'm like, it literally got passed in August, and it's February, and the federal government, it's going to take a little bit of time. But it is happening, and we're excited about getting the word out to more people around the country as part of our lobby on some of the good things that are coming out of it. We support it also because there was a report from Wood Mackenzie. They updated their forecasts on clean energy, noted that they expect 50% increases in solar installations and large-scale solar, and also 85% higher in terms of wind installation. So the IRA is doing what people have wanted to do, which is really spurring clean energy development around the U.S. But like I said, this will take time. One of the other challenges that comes out of the IRA is the fact that the U.S. government's capacity to really do these big ideas and projects and so forth is a little bit hampered. The Environmental Protection Agency lost, I think, about 20% of its staff or so during the Trump administration. And other agencies like DOE need to staff up. I think DOE needs to hire 1,000 new professionals. And so there's a real effort to get staffing going so that the government can really lean into the IRA. One of the post-IRA, and obviously as you all know, immediately tied to it, is the challenge of and the need for permitting reform, which is something I know that CCL is focusing on, and my organization will be keeping an eye on as well. There was a bill introduced, I believe, this week by Congressman Gary Graves from Louisiana that focuses on changing permitting laws and making changes to the National Environmental Protection Act, aka NEPA. So we'll be following that issue. We don't really have an official position on it as FCNL, but we lean towards pretty much where CCL's position is. One of the things I like about CCL is that it helps me to realize we're not the only organization out there that supports clean energy and supports the changes that need to be made to it, and supports also carbon pricing. It gets a little lonely in DC when it comes to carbon pricing advocacy. But permitting reform is going to be on the agenda for Congress this year when we talk about what happens after the IRA. It's hard to avoid the fact that we need to look at the permitting laws at the federal level, and also state level permitting laws are going to come into play as well. But the underlying case that we need to build faster and more efficiently, we support permitting reform, because unless you really make those changes in a careful way, we're not going to be able to reach our clean energy targets and goals in the U.S. So we recognize the importance of permitting reform. I imagine that debate is going to be going on for months. It's not going to be any easier because we get closer and closer to an election, which will influence the conversation. But there is bipartisan agreement, we think, on permitting reform. The devil is in the details. We'll be keeping an eye on it. But like I said, we support efforts towards streamlining the permitting process, ensuring that communities are not negatively impacted by any changes. That's always very important. I will commend to you a report that came out of Brookings, and I'll share it with Sabrina so you can share it with your community here, that talks about the need for more staffing at these agencies, particularly the Department of the Interior. It talks about the helping to streamline the process for the federal government to do permitting. It talks about the fact that not all of the changes necessarily need to come from changes to NEPA, but there are other regulatory avenues that need to be looked at as well. So it's a complex challenge, but we support it because, as I said, we at FCNL like CCL support those efforts to move the clean energy transition faster. So where are we with post-IRA, and also I'll add the Infrastructure Investment in Jobs Act, another terrible acronym, IIJA, and the CHIPS bill around semiconductors. These three pieces of legislation are really laying the groundwork and really the first floor, actually, for a clean energy transition in the U.S., and that's why we're excited about it. To follow up on that, like I said, permitting reform is very important. We're also thinking about, at FCNL, what is the next phase in terms of how we address the energy transition and the need to expand clean energy. And that has brought us back to an issue that you all are familiar with, that FCNL has worked on for many years, a carbon fee and dividend. We think that it would be a really nice complement to the legislation that has been passed for the U.S. to look at a carbon fee and dividend. It's been very interesting to hear senators like Senator Romney, Senator Whitehouse, Senator Schatz, both of whom were very strong on the need for a carbon price. And I feel like they almost got it in for Build Back Better / the IRA because of the work with advocates like yourself. But it's interesting here on the Republican side. You know, Senator Romney came out and said, you know, the Democrats had a chance to put a carbon fee in the IRA. You know, and sort of regretting that didn't happen. And it's interesting because, you know, he could have been in the process, and no one was trying to sneak it by. But it's hopeful because I think that people on both sides of the aisle still recognize that it is a very straightforward, common sense approach that can add value. If it's done in the right way, it doesn't have to be regressive. I don't have to tell this audience this, you all know about this. But in the 2.5 years I've been lobbying on this issue, I'll be honest with you, I started out and I thought, carbon pricing. Someone said to me, people have been talking about it for a decade. Be that as it may, it doesn't change the fact that it is the most sensible, straightforward policy that we could enact in this country. You know, I said to my sister who lives out in Portland, Oregon, I said, it's like there's money floating through the air, you know, in the form of carbon. And if we could figure out a way to get a carbon fee and dividend passed, I think it would be, as someone said to me, and I agree with them, a transformational policy for this country. And there are a lot of different ways that we could do it. But we are going to be working this year and over the next couple of years, recognizing that this isn't going to happen this Congress. We're going to work really hard. We're going to be laying the groundwork so that we can see it happen in the near future. So in terms of the climate policy landscape, we want to see building on the IRA, CHIPS, IIJA. It's a fantastic foundation that we have. We want to be talking about carbon fee and dividend with the carbon border adjustment, which I'll add. I was just listening to a podcast this morning, Senator Kramer from North Dakota, Senator Cunningham from Louisiana. Both are interested in carbon border adjustment. You know, the devil's in the details once again, because how do you do a CBA when you don't have a carbon price? But what we're excited about is the fact that there are bipartisan conversations, there's bipartisan interest. And I'll finish on that note. Our earlier speaker, it was really interesting, he was talking about, he showed this diagram of the left and the right, or, you know, people not agreeing with each other. The vast middle was this yellow space where there's a lot of agreement. And he mentioned the fact that a lot of people in Washington and around the country really make money off of keeping us divided, and particularly in Washington. And it resonated with me because, yes, there are people on television talking about we should divide the country between red states and blue states. And I don't know how that would happen because we're all red and blue in this audience together. Yeah, it's purple. It's not red or blue. But there's a lot of bipartisan agreement. There's a lot of just people-to-people agreement that happens in Washington, and you don't hear about it because it doesn't make the news, because it's not sexy, because it's not anger. But there is a lot of agreement going on, and serious people on the Hill and off the Hill are looking at how do we come up with a climate policy that works for everybody, that benefits the red states and blue states, and gets rid of that whole red-blue divide, which we should just move beyond. But how do we use climate policy to knit this country back together? And that is one of the most important things when I think about the IRA and the other bills. This legislation has to work, because we need to rebuild trust in each other, we need to address the climate crisis, and we need to be able to move forward as a nation. And so that's why FCNL is proud to work with CCL and our allies across the country in terms of moving climate policy forward. So with that, I'll finish and turn it back over to Sabrina.
Thank you so much, Clarence. So remember, for that career panel that we're going to talk about, look at all the jobs that Clarence had just talked about, Department of Interior, Department of Energy, right? We want to continue connecting throughout the day, and we get to end today with Clarence Edwards, so make sure to come back as he continues on his thoughts about really what's next, especially the role of carbon pricing and carbon border correction in the next set of climate legislation. And so, you know, it's been wonderful knowing that people like Clarence Edwards from Friends Committee and also Wandra Ashley Williams are really all working on carbon pricing in different manners with different voices, you know, whether it's a religious voice or whether it's a state voice or environmental justice voice. It's really been wonderful for me to see, and I hope for you as well, that it doesn't feel so lonely, right? Because we have to know that we're not in this alone, because we can't be. It would be impossible then. So we're starting the plenary now with Wandra Ashley Williams. And so we're going to start with the discussion, followed by some more information. So come on up. I can just, wait, can we have two? Yeah, sorry. You'll have to be a little patient with us. We're testing things out. Wandra?
We actually, you guys make the far chairs just so we avoid the projector, because the projector is going to be in your eyes and you can't sit here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, so
Yeah.
we're going to actually sit there. Sorry. Okay. When you sit here, so you can see the clicker. Yes. Okay. Great.
You guys can be closer if you want.
Okay. Can I have the? We're testing all this out. As you can see, we had quite a bit of change in the room since this morning, so there's just been a lot of changes overall. And you get the clicker. So when the slides come up, and things. Thank you. Okay. So first of all, oh, okay. Yes. Yes. Okay. Hold on a second. I'm just gonna have to organize myself here. All right. Sorry, I need to face you. Okay. Okay. Here we go. Is this okay? Am I in anybody's way?
You're good.
Okay, great. Thank you. I think many of you have met wonderful Wandra Ashley Williams. She's a very accomplished senior management executive, community activist, elected official, notable experience in diversified industries and public services, and she has deep roots in NAACP, both the national and in Maryland NAACP. And she's worked with a lot of different organizations, including, I think it's Maryland Women's Interests, and then the health and police reform, all kinds of things. So I think we have a pretty good sense of Wandra with most of her past work. However, I don't think most of us know that she was actually deputy mayor here in New Jersey. Was it Franklin County?
Somerset.
Oh, Somerset, okay. And I learned from her that she's learned quite a bit from being on the campaign trail as a politician. So would you like to share a little bit of insight about what you learned being a politician?
Yes, and thank you, Sabrina. I lived here in New Jersey for quite some time, And I also lived in Pennsylvania, for those who are here from Pennsylvania. And I was always a community activist. At the age of 21, I think, I served on the American Heart Association Board of Directors, the youngest ever and the only African American. And was very much involved in the NAACP, among other organizations. Here in New Jersey, I don't know if you've heard of the Black Issues Convention. I was on their board of directors, AHA here in New Jersey as well, and the Maryland State, as well as the Brunswick branch in NAACP. So that was my way of addressing issues. I was not even thinking about running for office. In fact, I spent my time meeting with legislators, telling them why they should do what I thought they should do, local, state, and Washington, D.C. as well. And my dear friend, and those in New Jersey and I would think throughout the country recognize the name of Donald Payne, Congressman Donald Payne, was a dear friend of mine. And he's the one who encouraged me to run for office. He said that you're in the community, folks know you, you know the issues, and you're passionate about the issues. We need someone like you. And so I thought about it, and I said, okay, what the hell, I'll try. So I did. I'm used to discrimination. I am an African American woman, so therefore, all my life, I've had to deal with it from one situation to the other. So I wasn't totally surprised when I joined a team. There were 4 of us on a Democratic ticket, 3 Caucasian men and myself. And the party, the Middlesex and Somerset County Party, embraced us because there weren't that many Democrats in Somerset County, so we were really aligned with Middlesex quite a bit. And they did this poll, and they called us to the table to talk about this poll. And we were told there was one person who got the ticket running for mayor, that he would win. The other 2 gentlemen would come in on his coattail. And Wandra, by the way, you don't have a chance. So I said, okay, let me see the data. I took the book home, I studied it, I even called people I know throughout the county, the town. Franklin Township is 46 square miles, but really at that time, maybe 50,000 citizens. And I know I had been all over that town. So everybody I talked to said, we were never called. We were never called. And so I said, okay, then here's what I'm going to do. I will run my own campaign. I will continue to be a part of the team on the ticket, but I will run my own campaign because you guys are not going to campaign for me, and I know that. And that's what I did. While I was doing it, I included all of my teammates. I didn't separate myself from them, but my folks went door to door with me and without me, and we won. The day of the primary, where we had 9 people on the ballot, we had 4 Republicans, 4 Democrats, and 1 independent. And let me just say real quick, when we saw that chart that had the blue and the red and the yellow in between, that was Franklin Township. Most of the voters in Franklin Township were undeclared because they wanted an opportunity to vote for the right person, not the right party. So I love that. And I definitely played to that, okay? So at this primary, folks were talking and I was engaged in conversation and I saw my teammates all, kind of sad. And then I heard the Republicans, Wandra, you won. You won more votes than any of us. And I was, but I said that to say, know your worth. Know your worth, no matter what you're doing. Don't let anybody turn you around and tell you that you're not worthy, that you cannot do what you think you can do. And don't always rely on polls. I know we are all involved in the political process, but please, don't always rely on polls. So that was my experience.
Thank you for sharing that incredible story. I think that determination to re-examine data is certainly important. I think we heard from Riaz about how we all get a very, I guess, probably a biased view of data depending on who gives the data, right? And to just say, okay, let's check with real people. You called up real people and say, what are your thoughts on this? And to really see most of America as that purple that Clarence talked about, that we really do want something that's best for all of America rather than the extremes, right? And I know it's really hard not listening to extremes. I have personally felt very sad losing CCL members because they just felt sucked into the extreme and their energy sucked out. So I think one of the incredible things about Wandra is her sense of self and that energy, right? So I don't know if you want to share like how you get that energy in that.
I'm passionate about what I believe. I am really passionate about what I believe in. I guess I was, as a child, I kept my thoughts inside. I was a middle child. So I had a brother and a sister, vying for attention on one end, and an older brother and a sister, the same thing on the other end. So I would go for it, fight for it. I'll be independent. I'll do what I need to do. And that's what I did through life. And that's what I believe. I believe that, you have to be centered. You have to know who you are. And you have to have a belief in a higher being, whomever, whatever that is. And that's how I start my day. In meditation, I ask for strength. And I try not to, I do better now than I did in the past, but I try not to worry about situations because worry won't change the situation.
Thanks so much. So now we're going to sort of go into the details of what Wandra's latest work is, which is Climate XChange as a regional director. So I think you've heard from Clarence about the need for carbon pricing, in the U.S., and I think he'll probably share the reason we need that internationally as well. Wandra, in her journey, has synthesized, two big issues: environmental justice and climate change, right? And I really have appreciated your simplified definition of environmental justice, the need to provide middle-class jobs for the environmental justice communities. And certainly that helps me focus on what is it in a bill that could tie it to environmental justice. So Wandra has been head of the Climate Crisis Environmental Justice Act in Maryland. So that's what she's going to go over some of the details here. She's got the clicker.
Yeah, the CCEJ. CCEJ, the Climate Crisis and Environmental Justice Act. So, I thought you were going to say something, I'm sorry. So, with this act, we want to, in Maryland, we were really pushing to, we had a 40% reduction goal in Maryland, and we wanted to increase that goal. Last year, we did that through another piece of legislation. So now it's at 60% reduction goal. And I think that's probably the highest in the country so far. And so, in doing that, we pulled that out of our bill, but the bill supports that goal, okay? And what we want to do with the bill is, number one, we charge the fossil fuel companies for the damage that they have done, and we take the revenue and we put it back in the community. The revenue does not go to the general fund. So state government can't decide, well, we know it's for this purpose, but we can use it for another purpose. We can't do that. We have two funds set up, and I'll show you that later. And so how does it work? The CCEJ supports the new statewide guidelines, as I said, that was passed last year. And we charge this fee. It's a gradually increasing fee that starts at $50 for non-transportation fuel, and that's for your households. And it starts at $10 for transportation fuel. And it increases up for 10 years, and it's capped at that point until we reach the goal of zero emissions. That is a drop in the bucket to fossil fuel companies. I know you've read the kind of profits they're making now, and they've known since the 70s the damage this dirty fuel is doing to our land and our bodies. And they have not really addressed that issue, so we want to give them an incentive to do that. And so we want to make sure those communities that suffer the most from climate change do not bear the burden of the remedy. So we want to make sure that fee is not passed down. We went to the Attorney General, and the Attorney General said it would not be illegal for us to put language in this policy that says the fossil fuel companies cannot pass that fee down to the consumer. And if it were challenged, the AG would definitely defend that policy. In addition to that, you see this pie, this circle here. On the left, in the blue, is the benefits fund. This is where the revenue goes. It will go to a benefits fund, 50%, and we project about $1 billion a year. So 50% goes to the benefits fund, and then 50% will go to the infrastructure fund. The benefits fund, 80% will go to the households of the frontline communities and other communities, such as the African American community that is known has suffered the most. Okay, and so 80% of that pie, half of that pie, will go to those frontline communities, and 20% is going to go to energy-intensive businesses to help them as well. It goes to their pocketbooks. It does not go into the community. It goes into the households and to the businesses. The infrastructure fund, half of it, no less than half of it, will go back to those communities to help them move into this green, clean environment that most of us will be able to do, but some of us will not. And so we're going to stick with the Justice 40, but we upped it a little to 50%. We want to make sure 50% goes back to those same communities to provide solar panels, to give rebates for electric vehicles, or whatever. There's a lot of flooding in those communities and throughout the state. Whatever is needed in those particular communities, there's funding for that. The other 50% will go to our municipalities. We're governed by counties, pretty much in Maryland, except that we do have Baltimore City, and I think Annapolis, and maybe another, but basically it's governed by counties, so we have 24 counties. They have an opportunity to write their climate action plan. We only have maybe 2 that have been written in the state. A couple have been worked on, but they find it difficult implementing those plans. So all they have to do is come to the Department of the Environment with their plan, and there's money in this legislation that will help them fund writing those plans. But in addition to that, mitigating the effects of climate change in their community. Sea level rise on the Eastern Shore, just throughout the state, we have so many different issues. So that's basically the gist of this bill. It had a lot in it before, and we finally got to a point where, listening to our coalition members, we decided to just remove all of the fluff and make it strictly an environmental justice bill. And that is what it is at this point.
Thank you for that overview. We're wondering, what were the main barriers that you saw in communicating what seems to, I think, many of us, quite a simple bill, but I think for many people it's like, what are you talking about?
Well, when you make it very simple, the average person is willing to support this bill. Because basically, someone has said, you know, people read just a portion of a bill, they don't get into the details and whatever. Well, our bill was so thick, you know, folks didn't want to read it. And now that it's down to where it is now, folks do have an opportunity to read it. But if you just make it very simple you know, and you say, we're going to charge the people responsible for the damage they've done, and we're going to take that money and put it back in the community. And it is not, and to improve our infrastructure, because that's definitely what we want and need. We all have a role to play, but some of us can afford to play that role, to pay for that role than others. And we want to take that into consideration.
Thank you. One of the things that I really appreciate about what you're doing, Wandra, is building a more diverse coalition, and we will have a breakout with Wandra in room 308 to further discuss that. But in addition to that, I wanted to share your thoughts about next steps, including what's going to be happening on March 1st with more discussions about carbon pricing.
Let me just say this before to finish answering your question, because it just occurred to me I didn't. We do have a challenge. We have a big challenge, and the challenge is with our legislators. I'll be very honest with you. And there are different reasons for it. But we do know for a fact that we need support from both sides. It can't just be a Democratic policy. In Maryland, the Dems do control the legislature. And now we do have a Democratic governor as well. But we all breathe air. We all need clean air to breathe. And we all need the full legislature support. We do have individuals, and they're not just Republicans, there are some Democrats, that, now I'll be very honest with you, depend on some of these companies for their campaign funding. And I'm just being honest. And with that, they don't necessarily vote against the bill, but they will support the bill. The bill in the legislature really had 76 co-sponsors, unheard of. 76 co-sponsors in the House. And it had maybe 28, 29 Senate. Of course, we have less in the Senate, so almost half of both houses. However, the bill could not get out of the Economic Matters Committee. And that is the committee where we have the challenge. And so, no matter what you do, you're going to have a challenge, but you have to find a way to get around that challenge. And we're at the point now where we have so much support from our coalition members and others, and it is building, that we really believe next year is going to be the year. We did not introduce it this year because of the election. Every seat in the state was open, and it was just a mess. And so we couldn't really pre-file, and didn't really get it there in time to introduce it. But that's a good thing in that we have this time doing now, and when we pre-filed in October, 1st of November, to get more support for the bill.
To put things into context, Maryland only has 90 days for the legislative session. So if you don't get a pre-file quickly,
90 days, and usually about 3,000 bills introduced, and only about 2,000 are addressed. That doesn't mean they pass, but at least they get a bill number, and maybe they'll get a hearing, maybe not. So it is very difficult. That's why it's best to pre-file if you can. And your question was, I'm sorry.
no, that's okay. No, that was a great added answer, because I think there's many barriers that we have, and I think the takeaway I got from that was we really need to work with the legislatures, right?
Yeah.
Because all humans are really good at giving sort of excuses and why they didn't do something or why they did do something, and to hold each other accountable, we really do need to keep discussing things and reminding our legislatures what's important to us, including bipartisan climate bills, right? And I think what I was asking you to think about, well, to share with us, was things that you are doing to continue the discussion for climate, for basically thinking about how we help environmental justice at the same time as transitioning out of fossil fuel with, yeah.
We have about 15 minutes left.
Okay, so no, I think I would like her to finish answering that, and then, so the way that we're doing it is, I asked people to sort of stand up about 15 minutes so we can wrap up whatever we're doing, so that we will have chances for you guys to ask questions, but I assume that you want to know what Wandra is planning for March 1st. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, there are a lot of people who really don't understand carbon pricing. And there are a lot of myths out there. And so what we're doing is we have a webinar. We thought about doing it in person, but we think that we'll reach more people if we do it as a webinar. It's on March 1st, which is Wednesday next week, in the evening at 6 o'clock. And we have speakers we're going to tell a story. We're going to talk about carbon pricing, what it is, what will it do, the myths, the truths about carbon pricing. And then I have someone else who's going to connect the dots. Carbon pricing as a vehicle to environmental justice, and talk about the importance of that. And then we have someone who's going to wrap it all up at the end and talk about how we're going to use this particular policy, this legislation, to get Maryland to a zero emissions economy.
Doesn't that sound exciting? And one of the people on their panel you'll know, Danny Richter.
That's right.
Yeah.
And then he's going to be there.
So
and I don't know if you know Tina Johnson,
yeah,
but she'll be there as well.
Yes, thank you. So we're going to go up for Q&A now. So there's several mics, including mine here. So if you want to raise your hand. And yes, a mic's coming to you, Clarence. And then...
I'll make it quick. Energy intensive trade exposed, and thank you very much for this. Really, I didn't realize it's going on in my own state. Energy intensive trade exposed businesses. Would those be heavy industry?
There would be businesses, mostly the smaller ones, that depend on energy to survive. You know, as an example that a lot of people could probably relate to is, you know, maybe if there's a small gas station as such. They have to depend on the gas because that's what they do, and so that would be an energy-intense business. Maybe some type of factory that rely on energy.
I'm Linda Vernoy from Washington, D.C., the D.C. Co-leader of the D.C. CCL chapter. And I'm wondering where Maryland is at in terms of renewable energy, because D.C. actually has the most advanced renewable energy goal of any nation. Because we're kind of like, I mean, any state, we're kind of like a state of 100% clean energy by 2032, and right now we're at 63% renewable energy. We get almost half of our energy from solar. So where is Maryland at in terms of that?
We're not that great, I'll be honest with you. We have a long way to go, and that's what we're working on. We have some legislation that's presented during this session that's going to help. One area that I'll mention it's very controversial, but we have the largest nuclear plant in the country, right in Maryland. And someone just said a couple of days ago, I was in Annapolis at a conference, and they were saying, well, we were competing with New Jersey, we weren't anymore. So we have the largest plant, and so that is, it's a possibility. I mean, it's a source, but we do know that we have a challenge, and we are working on that.
Hi, Amy Livingston from the Edison, New Jersey chapter. My question is, you talked about designing the bill in such a way that the costs, the added costs for the fossil fuel producers could not be passed on to consumers. If they're not passed on to consumers, how does it help to reduce consumption? Or is it not meant to?
Well, what it's going to do is give an incentive to these companies to come up with a cleaner way to provide energy. That is the purpose of the bill.
Hi, Charlie Arlo from Rehoboth Beach, Delaware. Do you have an estimate as to how this bill of yours would relate or produce results as compared to the carbon fee and dividend bill drafts which have been floated on the Hill, and or the other bills we've been talking about, the IRA, the IAJA, and some of the other alphabet soup that we're talking about? Does this achieve equivalent results from your estimation? as compared to carbon fee and dividend, or is it more, or is it slightly less? What do you think?
Well, it's not in line with the IRA by no means. But the thing about this bill is that we're making sure that that fee is not passed on in any way, shape, or form. That the fossil fuel company, those companies are the ones that are paying the fee. And with the other bills, they get out of paying the fee in some ways. They pass it on or they trade it off. There's different ways that they do that. But with this particular bill, we want to make sure that's not possible. One of the things that we're looking at to really secure that. Now, if for some reason the fee is passed on, or a portion of the fee is passed on, that is why we have this benefits fund for those folks who cannot afford it. Reality is, we have to pay somehow. All of us have a role to play in where we are today, right? We all have a role to play. And so if we have to, stop using plastic bags, we'll do that. If we have to pay an extra, 2 cents a gallon of gas, then maybe we have to do that until we get to where we need to be. But what we're doing in this legislation is making sure that those people whose health, their income, their homes, all have been affected by climate change over the years, that they're not the ones that have to pay. And so another thing that we're looking at doing, which is great that we have this time in between sessions, is to talk to the AG and find out if we can put in effect a prohibition. I think it was, I'm trying to think of what it was called, where the fossil fuel companies cannot increase the fees, and if they did, the state would be able to charge them. They would be able to hold them responsible. And so that is something we're going to talk to the AG about, see if we can get that in the bill.
Yeah, hi. My name is Greg Grass. Thanks for the presentation. I live in DC. And my question is, earlier, if you could just elaborate a little bit, you said that there would be like a $10 per some unit fee, and I'm wondering, is that $10 a gallon, $10 a barrel? Because you were making the point that it was a relatively small amount compared to the profits of the companies. And I'm just, this slide, if you could break this down a little bit, that would be helpful.
$10 a ton. That's for the transportation fee, the transportation fuel. And it will increase $3 every year. And it will cap at $37 for the transportation fee. Now, the non-transportation will start at $15, increase $5 a year, and it will cap at $60. And in Maryland, it is charged at the point of entry into the state. All of our fossil fuel comes from out of state. So at the point of entry into the state, they will pay this fee. Per ton.
Per ton of CO2.
CO2 per ton.
Thank you for the work that you're doing. I'm Neil Leary from Carlisle, Pennsylvania. I'd like to hear a little bit more about the environmental justice projects. Can you give us some examples of what is it that you're hoping is going to be done with the funds that are provided for those kinds of projects? What kinds of benefits, what communities will be benefiting from that now?
Oh, there's so many, but we definitely want to, someone came to us about in inner city putting solar panels on the schools and the cost of doing that. And community solar, all the community could benefit from it. That is the kind of project that these funds would pay for. Transportation, all the projects that we need, especially in Maryland, you can't get from where I live in Baltimore County to to Annapolis without driving or in a car somehow. And so we want to look at, you know, putting in lines where it's going to be easier for folks to commute from certain places in the state. The other thing is that we talked to some of the county executives, and a lot of them want a walkable community. And they've come up with plans for that. So the funding can definitely help, especially in our more urban type situations. Healthcare. I mean, my goodness, we have so many issues when it comes to healthcare, especially with asthma in our children and even adults. The number of asthma patients in certain communities is so much higher than other communities. And so ways to address that. And I mean, I could go on and on, but there's so much that can be done that relates to the climate crises that these funds will be available to assist.
Hi, I'm Farah Kadir. I'm an architect living in New Jersey, but working primarily in New York City. So I work a lot with building emissions, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around the carbon pricing metric that's shown here. So if you have, let's say, $15 per metric ton of carbon, how is that pricing determined? What was the process? Did you talk to other jurisdictions? Is that a number that's specific to Maryland's emissions data? And then second part of that question is that one flat rate for business owners, for homeowners, et cetera, or is that going to, because for me, I'm thinking in New York City, we have different emissions for different building types. And we penalize buildings annually if they exceed that annual emissions rate. And so that price varies by building occupancy. So is there any deviation or distinction?
You know, I'm glad you asked that question, because the fee is not charged to the consumer. You don't pay the fee at all. The fee is charged to the fossil fuel companies, the oil companies that produce the fossil fuel. They are charged the fee. You don't see the fee. The end user does not see the fee. The homeowner does not pay additional on their utility bill, their gas bill. Okay?
But I guess my main question is, how is that price determined?
Well, the price was determined, it's specific to Maryland. And to be honest with you, we talked to a lot of folks. Many wanted it to be higher than that, but we wanted to start at this level. And then over the years, we have written in the bill where the Department of the Environment will evaluate the situation, and if it is not working as fast as it should, we will increase the amount. But we came up with this amount because we feel that it's attainable and it is not going to bankrupt anyone. So that's how we came up with it.
So Farah, I just wanted to clarify, are you asking like a chemistry question in that, like how do you determine how much 1 ton of CO2 emitted is, or are you just thinking about the political viability of $15 per metric ton of CO2 emitted?
Well, I'm thinking that every jurisdiction is going to be establishing its own price.
No, it's not. That's the thing. It's one price for Maryland, and it's even simpler with our carbon fee and dividend because it's a national price at the source of extraction, which is even simpler. We want to make things as simple as possible. To have different prices for different jurisdictions is a huge headache.
You're right.
Do we have time for one more question?
Yeah, just a minute left. Is it a quick one, Mike?
Yeah, it'll be quick. I'm Mike Wilco, final vet from Bethesda, Maryland. First, Marylanders here, we know about the 5 levers of political will. What specific 1 or 2 ideas you have that we could do to help you get this bill passed?
Talk to your legislators. But we need the political will, we need political courage. And as voters, you can give them that courage. Let them know this is what you want. And I don't care how much funding they get from the fossil fuel companies. If they're not voted back in, they can't do anything, right? And so it is so important that when we send out the letters, we send out the text messages, we have these events, that you come to these events, we even give you sample letters that you can send out, we help as much as we can. But that's just what we need, your support by speaking to your legislators and making sure they understand you support this legislation. Thank you.
Can we give them a round of applause?
So we're going to have a 10-minute break now, but I want to